Hello, welcome back to my channel. So today's video, going to be doing a review of A Wizard of Earthsea, a book I most recently finished. I got it months ago, actually. Uh, I got it at a secondhand bookstore, which is why it's, not in the best condition. Uh, Still in good condition, it's just, not brand new or anything. So yeah, I got it at a secondhand bookstore that's not too far from where I live. It's not too out of the way whenever I'm going to get the groceries, just a short detour. So I stopped in there once a few months ago. And Guin is one of those sort of major fantasy writers. So I figured I should probably give her a try. She's she's probably the biggest fantasy female fantasy writer. I would say like the biggest of the the biggest woman in the fantasy genre, and one of the few women who is held up as one of the absolute legends of the fantasy genre. Most of the big legendary names do tend to be men, and even more white men. Le Guin is, a rare woman who is held up as being among the likes of Tolkien and all the other hoary old men. And yeah, so this was the first book in the Earthsea series. Originally published way, way back in 1968. And it's really good. Yeah, so it's like, I suppose Margaret Atwood would be one of the other major women in fantasy, but yeah, anyway. So way back in 1968, it is really good. It's got this, it's written in this almost epic style, which is really cool. It's written like a story, if that makes sense. Like it's written like like sort of like the Homeric epics, sort of like those where it's a tale being told rather than a book. It's a tale being told. It is a coming of age story about the main character, Ged. Uh, Sort of growing up and coming into adulthood, coming into his power, coming into being a proper man, a proper adult. He has some interesting adventures on the way. He's a very relatable protagonist because he's got an ego. He's especially through a lot of the book, he is a lot of his choices, especially early on, are made by his ego. He's a little bit arrogant. He doesn't like backing down from a challenge, and that gets him in trouble. Enough so that he decides that he needs to start growing up. Like that's sort of what prompts him to grow up. Is his arrogance gets him into trouble, and he realizes that he needs to be better about it. The Earthsea setting is really cool. It's a very interesting setting. Just a series of islands, which very different from normal very different from normal fantasy stories where you just got this continent that is constantly at war and everything. This is just a series of islands, most of which are not in any particular conflict, although there are some more violent groups to the east. One thing that is very interesting, uh, and I think one reason the book has not really had a live action adaptation, at least no major live action adaptations. The cast is dark skinned. Guin himself, the main character, has red brown skin, more Native American than African American. But other people are described as being darker skinned, except the people to the east, who are pale. Those people are violent raiders, kind of barbaric in a lot of ways. They're white. They're white people. I find that I like the fact that the white people are the violent barbarians and the dark skinned people are just cool people trying to live their lives. Peaceful people trying to live their lives. Very, very different from the majority of popular fantasy out there. So yeah, and I suspect the fact that it is a dark-skinned cast, that it is a cast of non-white people, probably kind of an obstacle to it getting major screen adaptations. Because Hollywood historically and still today not really willing to trust major productions, major motion pictures on the back of a black and Native American and just generally non-white cast. Anyway, yeah. So I suspect that's part of why it hasn't gotten any real adaptations aside from the Ghibli adaptation, which wasn't very well received either. And it is something that very much sets it apart from other fantasy, especially at the time, but even today, even now, you don't really see a lot of popular fantasy books like that. But especially 1968, yeah, you just did not see that. And it just, in a lot of ways, really subverts the fantasy genre. It is very much not a standard fantasy book. It doesn't have the style of a normal fantasy style novel, because it does have much more of that epic prose style, that epic prose, compared to more of a standard novel prose. It's much less focus on violence. It's really not a book about violence. There's occasional bits of it, but very, very, very little violence. There's almost no real violence in here. There's it's not a way to shy away from men being emotional. What's interesting is even the standard structure of the hero's journey. Even then, there are ways it doesn't follow the hero's journey precisely. And yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting book, and a lot of really interesting themes explored. Themes of balance. The power of names is definitely a major theme in the book. The idea that names have power. To name something is to control it. Um, the story itself is really well told. It's a really compelling story. Um, sort of the ending is not particularly surprising. The ending is something that it builds up to really effectively. So by the time it reaches the ending, you know exactly what's happening. It really does. Early on, you may or may not be able to predict it, but by the end, you're like, yeah, that's pretty much exactly what I was expecting. And it's very emotionally satisfying. It's a very satisfying finale. One which really does a lot to set up the character for future installments, because of course the Earthsea series did have a few different books. Um, 6 of them total. Not sure if I will end up reading the rest of the series. I'd like to, it's just, will I get the chance to? I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that I want to read, so I don't know if I will ever make the time to read the rest of them, but it is something that I wouldn't mind reading the rest. So yeah, I definitely do recommend it. It's great book. Obviously, hugely praised. Very widely praised. Hugely influential. Like I said, Guin is one of the biggest names in fantasy. A lot of some of the ideas, if it didn't necessarily originate some of the ideas, it certainly popularized them or codified them. Some certain ideas, such as the power of names. Even the idea of a school of wizards was sort of a big, fairly prominent part of this, and then most likely because of this did become a more popular idea among other writers. With Rowling in particular, then just taking the School of Wizards and sort of making that the setting for her entire Harry Potter series. That definitely did come in some ways from, it definitely was sort of popularized by Earthsea. I think it's fair to say that Rowling and other writers who have used similar ideas probably influenced by Earthsea. If not directly, then indirectly from other things that have been influenced by it. So it's much like Tolkien. Le Guin is kind of important reading for sort of the DNA, the biology, the source code of a lot of stuff that has become fairly commonplace in the fantasy genre. It's one of those bedrocks on which a lot of the stuff that's come since has built upon. And it still stands up as as a definite great in the genre. So yeah, Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. A lot of people probably have read this because it did come out 54 years ago now. It did come out over 50 years ago, so I'm only a little bit late on this one. But if you haven't read it, definitely recommend it. Not sure what my next book will be. Probably going to be Die by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans. Need to swing by my local comic shop to pick it up there. I did order it from there. Did ask a guy to put an order for it, so I'll need to swing by there to pick it up. Once I do, I'll try to get that read as soon as I can. So probably Die by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans as my next book, but this has been A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. So, thanks for watching, and hope to see you in another video.